Thank you, Sue Ellen. It is such a privilege to be here, and I know that I don't have to tell you how hard Sue Ellen works to pull together the author series every year and the book festival. She calls and texts me at all hours of the day and night asking for suggestions, and she has strong opinions, and she's an avid and insightful reader, and I feel like it's one of the gifts of the Vineyard to have met and worked with Sue Ellen. So thank you. But let's get started, Donnie Walton. So yes, Donnie and I came through the regular submission process. I got the stack from an agent, the novel from an agent, and I literally read it through the night, couldn't put it down, and I found that so many things in the book resonated, and I felt we had so much in common. I had to meet you, and we did find out on our first editing session that we were both born on June 23rd.
Yes, same birthday. And don't you also go by Dawnie as a nickname?
My mother and my 4 best friends call me Dawnie, so it's so fun to be here with you. But let's start with the book and let's give them the kind of elevator pitch. What is the final revival of Opal and Nev about?
Sure. So, well, first of all, thanks everyone for being here. This is a magical place, and it's a very special night for me because Dawn and I, who worked together through this whole process, this is the first time we've been able to have a conversation like this.
Yes,
so
in real life.
It's very special. So the final revival of Opal and Nev is written as a fictional oral history. So it's written in interview form. It is about an interracial rock and roll duo, a Black American woman, Opal, and a white British man, Nev. And it sort of follows their rise on the New York scene in the early 1970s, a moment that sort of changes the trajectory of their careers and sort of how they fall apart afterward. They are being interviewed as they are considering a big reunion at a festival in 2016. So you have kind of the backdrop of the presidential election happening. And the interviewer has a very personal and painful connection to the duo. It's not a spoiler to say, it's on the very first page. Sunny is the daughter of Opal and Nev's drummer who was killed during a sort of a riot that kicks off at an Opal and Nev concert in 1971. And so she is trying to learn more about her father and about his weirdo friends and what really happened that night in 1971.
So you chose the format of oral history, and I'm curious to know if that was the first kind of format that came to you, or did you have to kind of work your way through different iterations until you felt like this was the right framework for the novel?
Well, incredibly, it was the very first thing I started doing. I worked for many years at Entertainment Weekly, and we often use the oral history format to tell the stories of sort of iconic albums or movies or television shows. And I always loved the form. There's a book about Saturday Night Live called Live from New York that I really, really loved, that I think I had read not too long before I started writing Opal and Nev. And what I love about the form is, one, it just kind of gives everything iconic status, right? Because you're presenting a subject that lots of different people have opinions about, and everybody wants to talk about the thing. And two, because people have different memories.
They do.
The memories contrast, and so the reader becomes very engaged trying to figure out what is the actual truth. And it was also just fun and freeing to channel the voices so raw directly onto the page and not worry about a cohesive narrative voice, just to sort of think very deeply about each character and how they would speak. And so Opal was the character that started talking to me first, and the very first words I ever wrote were the very first oral history in the book, where she's talking about growing up with her sister Pearl in Detroit.
So speaking of the characters, we obviously have Opal and Nev, the 2 lead characters, but you have their producers.
Yes.
You have her sister, Pearl, who you just alluded to, Pearl's husband.
Yeah.
You have Virgil, who becomes her friend when she moves from Detroit to Harlem.
Yep.
You have so many different characters, and one of the things that I think really showcases your talent is you also had to channel what they might sound like, what their experiences might sound like.
Yeah.
You know, someone's from the Midwest, someone's from the South, someone's gay, someone's black, someone's British. Was that hard?
It was hard, and it was a challenge I set for myself. I wanted a reader to basically open to any page and plop their finger down and know by the language and the word choice and the rhythm who was speaking, and that was the challenge I set for myself. But it was also fun to kind of think about and to do different exercises to think about how each character would talk. With Nev, for instance, I just always sort of imagined him as kind of an anxious person and like trying to be very careful in like what he's getting across, and so I had him speaking really fast. So he speaks in run-on sentences, you know, just kind of like a motor mouth. I thought very deeply about how each character would curse. That was a great exercise. So like Howie will say anything, but Virgil will not. You know, Virgil's a very kind of elegant character. So all those little things were very helpful to nailing the different voices.
So Nev has talent, and he's signed up on the label almost as a folk singer.
Yeah.
But he's not breaking out. And the record label is like, what do we need? How can we break this guy out? And they hire a producer who has this great idea. Let's pair him with a black woman.
Yeah.
That inspiration, based on fact, based on a real life?
Well, yeah. So at the time in the early 1970s, especially with a lot of British rock stars, when they wanted to add sort of a soulful element to the music, they were looking to black women singers. They were looking to women who had grown up in the church, you know, singing gospel. This is how we got Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones, right?
The hook in that.
So Mary Clayton is the singer on that song, and she, you know, was a preacher's daughter and grew up singing in the church, and she basically is duetting on this song with Mick Jagger. And a lot of people, of course, we know that voice. It's so iconic, but a lot of people don't know who Mary Clayton is. And she, you know, went on to have a couple different solo records and just never took off. And, you know, part of writing this book for me was imagining what if someone like Mary Clayton had.
There's that great documentary in which she's one of, what is it?
20 Feet from Stardom was
Highly
a movie.
recommend.
Yeah, so that is a movie that greatly inspired this book, actually. Yeah.
I'm curious, so that movie inspired the book, and I'm particularly interested in Opal. So Opal and Nev have this, they're having a moment. He pairs these two together. It actually starts to work.
Yeah.
They're having a moment. There's this promotional concert. Things go wrong. Nev's star continues to rise, and Opal's dims. I'm curious about Opal, and it dims, but she refuses to play the game to kind of keep it going.
Yeah.
She has to be true to her values.
Yeah.
So who is your inspiration for Opal? You talked about Clayton. Is there anyone else? I mean, I thought Grace Jones maybe. I don't know what others.
So there's sort of a triumvirate of women that I think are the major inspirations for Opal, with a couple others sprinkled in. The first is Grace Jones. Grace Jones was actually the first person that I was sort of thinking of in terms of the look and the style and the kind of outre attitude.
Because we should say Opal is not at all conventional. She is not a Diana Ross-like figure. She doesn't have the glowing locks.
No, she's sort of androgynous and very, very dark skinned like Grace Jones, and sort of unusually famous for someone in our very color-struck society, right?
Right.
So Grace Jones definitely won. Nona Hendrix of LaBelle, who I just love. Actually, after I finished writing the book, I saw her in concert in Brooklyn, and it was such a special moment because there were all these fans, these black folks who were just like older, and you could tell like they were Opal fans, you know, like
Right.
back in the day. But Nona Hendryx was sort of the one in the group who was pushing the rock and roll direction,
Right.
and also writing politically tinged music. So one of my favorite LaBelle songs is called Who's Watching the Watcher, and that's a Nona Hendryx special.
Oh, nice.
And also LaBelle had the wild outfits, you know,
Right.
like silver spacesuit looking things and feathers all over the place. And they had a very diverse fanship that reminds me of the cult of Opal and Nev's fans, who are called the Mercurials. So,
Right,
yeah,
right.
that's the second. And then the third is an artist that we just lost in the past year, Betty Davis, who was a funk star on the New York scene and had a very bold and electric stage show. And for one brief year was married to Miles Davis and was sort of given the credit for electrifying his sound.
Oh, sure.
You know, so she kind of had this muse reputation, but was also just a wonderful artist in her own right, and was very uncompromising. Like when the business stopped working for her, she left and went back to her hometown of Pittsburgh. And then there's dashes of Nina Simone, you know, in terms of the politics and the believing that celebrity gives you a responsibility and a platform, which is very much a part of the Opal character. And Eartha Kitt.
Love
Eartha Kitt. There's scenes of Opal doing interviews with Sonny in the garden, and there's this kind of iconic interview with Eartha Kitt in her garden.
Yes.
And so all of that is riffing. Yeah.
I love that in the book you actually have them on TV shows.
Yeah.
You have excerpts from newspapers that would kind of riff on what was happening. So you've named, Nona, you've named artists from the past.
Yeah.
Anyone carrying that torch today?
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about this a lot. I think Santa Gold is an artist that I really, really have loved in terms of kind of her music being a melange of all kinds of different styles, and also just being really cool and always like a little bit ahead of her time and trend setting, you know, and being very much a New York artist.
Got it.
Santa Gold, I think I was talking with my husband about this earlier today, and he said Lizzo. I think Lizzo is a great example of someone who is sort of changing standards and understands like the power of her platform and is very careful about what she's putting out into the world.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love it. So we've talked a lot about Opal. Can you read us a little bit of a passage that might give us more access?
Sure. So I am going to read, let's see. So this is from the scene where Opal and her sister Pearl, they're in Detroit, and this is the night that Nev sort of sees Opal for the first time. He's looking for a musical partner, and Nev is there with Howie Kelly, who is sort of the crass label owner of Rivington Showcase. And so they're at an amateur night, and she's just sort of talking about what she's wearing. And this kind of gets at Opal's style, not just in terms of like her clothes, but also her creativity as an artist. And this is an oral history again, so I'm not an actress, but I will do my best. Opal Jewel. That night, Pearl and I were wearing crushed velvet, gold crushed velvet, or maybe velour. Honey, I don't know, whichever one of those is the cheaper fabric. I'd made Pearl a jumpsuit out of it with the top that I tried to keep fitted so the people could see that she had something. And out of the same material, I'd cut myself a halter and shorts, and I took a brass chain from an old pocket watch I found at the Goodwill, and I shined it up nice and wrapped it around my skinny little waist like a belt, trying to create some kind of effect. Now, To Sir with Love was mid-tempo, but me being me, I'd still find a way to shake it, so that right on beat, that chain would jingle like mad, as Nev would say. Howie Kelly. She had this deep ebony skin, so any colors looked dramatic on her. I'll give her that. And it was like music every time she moved. You just wanted to stick a tambourine in her hand and watch her go. Opal Jewel. For years, Pearl had adored To Sir with Love. I mean, everybody was crazy about the movie because Sidney Poitier was so damn fine. And the sentiment of it was very sweet and chaste. But don't let the sweetness fool you. That's a belter song, a big chance to show out, and Pearl used to beat it dead. You remember, though, that on the original track, Lulu doesn't have any backing vocals, so I had to make up my own part, get in where I fit in. And when I listened to that record, I realized that a big part of it, what gave it emotion and light and air, was the strings. At the Gemini, this is the club, there was obviously nobody with a damn violin in the house band. I figured, well then, that's my part. I'm the strings. Pearl would go loud and broad, just like Lulu, and I'd fill in high above her, floating real soft and pretty, like painting those letters in the sky.
I love that. So they have a moment, they're at this promotional concert. Rivington is showcasing all of their talent.
Yes.
They're looking for their big breakout hit, right?
Yeah.
And a rival band kind of brandishes the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
And as I like to say, all hell breaks loose.
Yes.
So I know that you were working on this book for a while, and
Yeah.
we're now talking about the Confederate flag with some frequency and regularity, but while you were starting this book and in the early stages, it wasn't as common to discuss the Confederate flag and what that means for some communities. So talk to me about how, and it's very dramatic in the book, it's very powerful. Talk to me about how you came to that moment.
Well, it's always been a particular fascination of mine because I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, which is the home of Lynyrd Skynyrd, which is the band that I pretty much based the Bond Brothers, the rival band in the book, on. A Southern rock band. This is the Sweet Home Alabama band that very much used Confederate iconography in their merchandise, on their album covers, all of that. And I always felt, as someone from Jacksonville, whenever I was a teenager and went to a rock show, people would kind of jokingly scream out to the stage, "Free Bird," which is another song or whatever. So Lynyrd Skynyrd is very deeply a part of Jacksonville, and it felt conflicting to love rock music so much as a black woman, young black woman who was very triggered by that. Right? And so I've always been kind of fascinated by that. And thinking about the era I was writing about, the early 1970s, I just thought there's so much interesting music happening at that time on the charts. You have Southern rock, you have Laurel Canyon scene kind of developing out in California. This is in the years right before punk kind of broke big. And I just wanted to create a fictional concert where all these different styles that are on this label, because the label is just throwing spaghetti against the wall and trying to see what sticks, right?
Right.
Let's see all these styles and all these fan bases coming together in this one venue and see what happens. And Opal being Opal, I write in the book her childhood, and her mother is, part of the Great Migration. So their family is from Birmingham, Alabama. Opal grows up in Detroit, but she goes to spend summers down south. And so the Confederate flag is something that also very much triggers her. And so this is kind of like the flashpoint moment.
Very much so. And in the aftermath of this catastrophic concert. No, we don't want to give too much away, but again, Opal's light begins to dim. She has to revert to B movies to pay the rent. And meanwhile, Nev I kind of think of as this, almost like this Paul McCarthy figure. I mean, I don't know if that's quite right, but he's affable and he's lovely, and he's a good musician, and he's not compromised at all.
Yeah.
But Opal pays the price. For staying true to her ground. And so I want to talk about the development of Opal as a character, it's dim for her for a while.
Yeah, and so shortly after the showcase, they do have sort of a brief moment of fame, and Opal begins to become sort of a notorious figure when people want quotes on different things, like they go to her, and it ends up like kind of creating a box around her, which is something that she sort of really has trouble with. The label is kind of trying to capitalize on this moment, and it doesn't, it works for a while until it doesn't, until it becomes uncomfortable for Opal. And so Opal is the kind of character, she really feels strongly that she needs to be authentic at all times. And I think that's when the game of it becomes difficult for her. And so, but however, like she still has to pay her bills, and I mean, she still has responsibilities. And so for her, it's always a question of, this is the box that's been put around me. What am I going to do with it? That's always like the question.
I saw this really in some ways, like we've been talking a lot about music, and it is a lot about music, and it's something you love, but it's also really a book about an artist, an artist who won't compromise, and the price that has to be paid. I'm wondering if you see any parallels, maybe it's Lizzo, I don't know, in today, like the role of the artist today, and is anyone carrying that torch?
Well, I think that artists today, I think, tend to kind of shy away more, maybe, from that kind of thing. And I did learn that by watching a lot of old clips of, like, the Dick Cavett show, right? You'd watch those clips, and there would be celebrities on there really going in about different issues of the day and having these conversations, and you just don't kind of have that dynamic in the same way anymore.
Maybe an athlete. I was just listening to an NPR, maybe driving from OB to NPR. I listened to a lot of NPR driving from OB. But they were just talking about with Bill Russell passing how politicized, and he really kind of started that. I mean, athletes have a legacy of that for sure. I mean, thinking about Muhammad Ali as a figure who nearly gave up his whole career. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about this novel. So as a book editor, a lot of first novels are autobiographical. Inevitably, you will see, I would say 80% of them are autobiographical. There's some of you in this, in that Sunny's a journalist, you're a journalist. It's about music, you love music, but so much of it feels so much more mature than a first novel.
Thank you.
So did you have a lot of it? Was that like in the 7 years were you writing yourself in and out? Or?
Well, so Sunny actually was a very late-breaking character in the book. I was just writing the straight oral histories, and it was fun to write so outside of myself about these wild people and this world that I was imagining, and kind of like looking at real events and kind of inserting them in different ways, and that was really fun. And then I went to get my MFA from Iowa, and I workshopped the first part of the book, which is just a straight oral history. And my classmates said, "We really like this, but who is everybody talking to?"
Oh, fascinating.
And that's the moment where I started thinking about Sunny as a character, and thinking about who would be the journalist that's weaving together all these voices. And I feel like the more I was writing her, the closer it felt to me, which at times was a little uncomfortable. So Sunny, for those who haven't read the book, she sort of breaks into the oral histories now and then with editor's notes, which are sort of essays on the present timeline, kind of describing what the interviews are like and what the characters are like today, and some of the difficulties that she's having with writing the story. And some of those bits I was pulling from some real life things. So Sunny is the editor-in-chief of a Rolling Stone style magazine. She is the first Black and first woman editor of that title. And there is a meeting that I write about that was very reminiscent of some meetings that I used to have when I worked for Time Inc., which no longer exists. But just always feeling the fact that she always feels a little bit paranoid about how she's doing and how people are perceiving her.
Yes.
That all is very autobiographical. But I think maybe the closest thing to me was the way Sunny describes taking in music and reacting to music. There's a scene where she describes hearing Opal and Nev for the first time. She goes to the public library in Philadelphia, and they happen to have the record there in the collection.
Yeah,
and she's listening to it, and she describes the feeling in her body like a fear response almost. And I remember hearing music before in my youth and feeling music that I felt is powerful and revolutionary, and having that same kind of excitement mixed with fear, that feels very real to me. And also just being a young Black woman into all kinds of like music, but particularly like weird rock and roll music, is close to me as well.
It requires you to kind of stand your ground and be your own self.
Right.
Talk to us about research. We had a great discussion here with another author about research. What parts of this, you talked about watching some documentaries, but you also were a journalist for Entertainment Weekly, so, and you love rock and you love music. How much research went into this?
You know, I'm asked this all the time, and people say, you must have done so much. And it doesn't feel that way because it was just feeding my obsession. It was just fun for me going down these rabbit holes. But yeah, I watched a lot of interviews on YouTube. I dug into the Billboard charts to see you know, where do I feel like Opal and Nev would have fit in? And I think I put them between like a Cheech and Chong comedy album and like something else.
Because it's in the 70s.
I also spent a lot of time looking at photography from the era, especially fashion photography, and kind of dreaming into the picture and kind of like making up stories about the pictures. And I read books, of course. I read Robin Givon's fantastic book on the Battle of Versailles fashion show, which is a 1973 Paris event that Opal goes to. And I read a lot of oral histories. Yeah.
I love that. That's so fun. Let's talk about Jimmy. Jimmy is Sunny's father. He's the one, as you said in the introduction, who is, he's the one who falls and dies during the climatic scene.
Yeah, or he's tossed into, well, he's
falls,
killed.
Yes. You know, as I was reading it as an editor, I read it many, many times, and obviously the focus is on Opal and Nev, their friendship. But Jimmy is such a compelling character. Talk to me a little bit about Jimmy.
Yeah. So Jimmy is really the crux of the book. As you said, so he is Sunny's father that she never met because Sunny's mother was 7 months pregnant at the time that he was killed. And he becomes sort of like a mystery figure in the book. Sunny's mother doesn't like to look back at this time. It's very painful for her, so she doesn't talk to Sunny a lot about her father. And so Sunny is very desperate to know how she's like him, you know?
Yeah.
And he is also sort of a safe place for Opal. He's one of the few other Black people in this rock and roll scene that she's in, and they have they have an inappropriate relationship. But, when he's killed, it is very devastating for her, and it sort of changes the trajectory of her life. Until that point, Opal had been sort of doing this as a lark, like it was fun, but it was just, music was just one of many different things that she was interested in. And when Jimmy dies, it sort of gives her a bit of purpose in a way, because she is trying to make something good out of this awful situation with her activism, you know? And so, Jimmy becomes sort of like an image and a symbol, but Sonny is trying to understand him more deeply than that in the book.
Yeah, he's very, very compelling and complicated. All of the characters are complicated. I mean, it's not like Opal is the hero and Nev is the, they're both complicated.
So flawed.
Their friendship is complicated.
Yeah.
In some ways, they're able to be their most vulnerable self with each other. But I think that Opal is dealing with so much more.
Right.
That Nev can almost kind of skate above. He's the charming, affable British guy.
I always say that Opal and Nev actually have quite a bit in common in the way they grew up and sort of being outcasts where they were from. And they are also both hugely ambitious. But because of who they are as people, that ambition manifests itself differently. And like one character will do anything and not feel away. And the other one has a limit to that ambition. And so that becomes kind of like the breaking point.
And and speaking of research, you have Nev is from the UK.
Yes.
Opal's from Detroit.
Yes.
She moves to Harlem.
Yep.
And then there's a part where she has to get away from it all and she goes to Paris.
Yes.
So that's a lot of, you also have to kind of feel like each place is authentic as the reader. So have you lived in all of those places? Like, where did that come from?
I have actually never been to Detroit.
Okay, good. Well, it is the writer's job to use the imagination.
Yeah, but I've always been, I've been really meaning to go, but it's, pandemic happened and like all these things. It has always fascinated me as sort of a place of Black resistance and empowerment. You have, the 12th Street riot, which I write about in the book. You have Motown, kind of entering the music industry and
disrupting it.
And so I felt like, and it is also very much a root from Birmingham, Alabama on the Great Migration. And so it felt like a great place for Opal to be from. I do remember, I did write parts of the Paris section in Paris.
Oh, nice, nice.
Which, especially when Opal goes into the Goutte d'Or neighborhood, a lot of that description is from my wanderings into that area.
I want to talk to you a little bit, working with authors, sometimes the accolades, this novel has had unusual reception. So Ellen read many of the blurbs. We were talking backstage about what was it like when Obama drops his What I'm Loving list, and you're on that. You're up for at least 4 prizes. I lost count, which is a luxury problem. I'm wondering how that impacts your thinking about novel 2. I mean, is that overwhelming and intimidating, or is that like, I am Superwoman now and I'm ready for this,
I don't know that I'll ever feel like Superwoman. Writing is such a vulnerable process. And for me, it's about thinking about something that is so complex that it raises a million different questions that I'm trying to answer. At the same time, I am so humbled by the reception for this book. I just remember sitting at my computer on a random Tuesday, and my publicist at Simon & Schuster called screaming on the phone, and she told me about the Obama thing. Which, he just drops it like a blessing. You don't even know it's coming. And, I asked her, when is he going to announce it? And she said, it's already up. Like, it was, but I feel very proud and also very nervous about book 2. Of course, you're always nervous about expectations.
Sure.
I get asked a lot, is it going to be another music book? Well, I don't know.
But you said that music,
Yeah.
it didn't feel like research for you. So I imagine if
Yeah.
it's not music, it is going to be something that you're so almost
Right.
obsessed with that
Right.
it will, you know.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of different things I'm thinking about right now. And I think anything that I do will include culture in some way, just because I'm just like a huge consumer of, you know, film, television, like all of those things. And I think those things are great reflections of who we are as a society. But yeah, I am beginning to get back to the place though where I'm turning things over in my head in that way that feels familiar, like I did with this one.
Now, so you were a journalist.
Yes.
And now you're a novelist.
Yes.
Do you see them living side by side, or are you pretty committed to mostly writing fiction?
Well, I'm pretty committed to fiction right now, but never say never. And I do think that I do think of, you know, narrative nonfiction or long form journalism
Creative
as
nonfiction.
creative, like it's all storytelling. And I think the instincts that I had as a journalist are the same ones that I have as a fiction writer.
Right.
In terms of having a deep understanding of what a reader is very hungry to know, and understanding when to disseminate information through the story and the different beats of a story. You know, film and television are the same way. It's all just storytelling.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm having fun with fiction at the moment, but who knows?
So this, I think you said, took 7 years to write.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if there are writers in the audience or someone who's always had this, you know, I'm going to write a novel one day, because you teach as well.
Yes.
What's the piece of advice that you would give, or the piece of advice that you were given that resonates most for you?
I always tell other writers that you have to please yourself first as a writer, and that you have to be so obsessed with the idea that you go back to the page over and over again, and that you think about your characters when you're washing dishes or doing things around the house. Like that level of obsession is the only thing that will keep you dedicated to it for 7 years.
Yes.
Because it can take a very long time. I mean, hopefully the next one goes faster, but
Yes, indeed,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
I don't want to give away too much, and I know we're going to take questions soon, but it's, you know, I was there, and I'm still curious. The title, the final revival of Opal and Nev, and I don't want to give away the ending, but you obviously have to have these characters who kind of fall apart, at least attempt to come together again.
Yeah.
So what was your guiding in terms of a writer, in terms of keeping the tension?
Yeah.
What was your motivation, and how did you manage that?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I think for me, the most interesting thing about a story is not what happens necessarily, but how we get there, how it unfolds. That's where the tension, I mean, I sort of give away a lot in the first paragraph of the book. And as we say, the title is referring to the big reunion concert that we're sort of driving toward at the end of the book. And so I don't want to be afraid to kind of be bold in that way, and just trust that the audience is going to come along on the ride with me. And it's just about kind of like having those moments along the way that add suspense and add complication, like constantly layering, constantly thinking about the relationship dynamics between the characters, and like everyone has kind of an arc, you know, and just having the reader fall in love with those characters and want to know how they ended up where we are by the end.
We've talked a lot about your musical influences. I'm curious about your the writers who've influenced you. I've never edited or read a novel that's structured as an oral history, and as an editor, I found it wholly original, and also full of these, as I said, complicated characters. But I'm curious, I don't know that we've actually ever spoken directly about your own influences. Maybe we have.
Gosh, there are so many, but I have to say Toni Morrison. just for her boldness and her, centering her experience as a Black woman most of the time. Song of Solomon is about a Black man, but there are lots of pivotal women in that story. I also find myself, when I need a little inspiration, going to YouTube and watching interviews with Toni Morrison.
Oh, interesting.
Who has a lot. I feel like she's constantly teaching me about how to write, one, but also how to be a writer in the world, and to build community with other writers, that kind of thing. But I also love Danielle Evans is a writer that I love, who writes short fiction. Edwidge Danticat.
Danielle gave you a fantastic blurb. I believe Sue Ellen read part of it, yes.
Yeah, it's the Washington Post one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do love how you have been so supportive of other writers, and other writers have been. I do think that's one of the positive things about social media, is that authors are able to support each other by posting books they're excited about, sharing, reading together. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think we are opening it up to questions, and if someone wants to grab a mic, I think they're going to be going around, and if not, I can keep going. Is everyone shy?
Ms. Walton,
Hi.
my son, who is a middle-aged white male, said, "You got to go listen to this. It's the best book I've read in years."
Oh, wow.
Which leads me to ask, when you write, do you think of the audience that you're writing for, or do you write what you want to write and see who's going to pick it up?
I will say I wrote this one for myself. This one was completely, if I were a reader out in the world, this book is what I would want to read. And that feels very selfish in a way, but again, it speaks to that kind of diving into my own obsession and the kind of like hoping and having faith that there are readers that it will resonate with along the way. Oh, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy. Thanks.
I love when, the recommendations go the other way. I'm still on the, with a sophomore in high school, I'm still like, you should read this, you should read this. Can't wait till they tell me what to read.
Yeah, I think the book, there was a surprising reaction to the book. Of course, when we finished this, we had no idea a pandemic was coming, right? And so this book was released in March of 2021. And one of the best things that I've heard about it was at a time when we could not experience live music together, when we couldn't have that communal experience, that the book gave people that feeling and that reminder, which was a really beautiful thing to hear.
I was just going to ask, what was a surprising reaction to the book?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Any other questions out there? Anybody? We have one.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm sort of curious about the Nev character.
Sure.
Where did the Nev character come from?
Yeah. Again, no one inspiration, but I was thinking about this idea of chameleonic figures, artists who have had long careers, many different phases to those careers. I'm thinking about Rod Stewart, I'm thinking about Elton John, and really thinking deeply about what that changeability stylistically might mean for an artist. So I was thinking about that. There is, you're right, Dawn, that there is some Paul McCartney in there in terms of like the talent and the song, the kind of songwriting that Nev does. He writes a lot of character-based songs, so I was thinking about Eleanor Rigby and Lady Madonna.
Yes.
So yeah, that's the kind of like thing that Nev does and has fun playing with. Yeah.
And he's electrified by Opal and him, as you said, they have so much in common, both kind of as outsiders, kind of independent. but it's a friendship, and it evolves. I love their time in the village together. I live in the village when I'm not here, and I thought that was particularly effective.
Yeah, they had lots of fun, and New York was new to both of them when they're 22 years old, know, and kind of suffering for their art. They're both broke and finding ways to be creative, and they also sort of enjoy freaking people out a little bit, you know what I mean? Like they enjoy the reactions that they get from people.
Can you close us out by reading a little bit?
Oh, let me see.
Oh, did I surprise you with that?
Yes, but that's okay. Let's see. Maybe I'll read a bit from when Opal first arrives in New York. So this first part is Sunny sort of giving context, and then Opal talking about her coming to New York City for the first time. Opal Robinson arrived in New York City via bus in July 1970, the same month and year Funkadelic dropped that fierce edict to free your mind and your ass will follow. She lugged to the taxi stand at Port Authority 2 duffel bags, one of them bursting with brand new fabrics, sewing supplies, and paperbacks, the other stuffed with an assortment of shoes for every season and cheap synthetic wigs. As for the fluffy afro wig that would not fit into her luggage, she wore that during her travels. In her jeans pocket was a slip of paper with the address for her new home in Harlem. She had found the room listed in the classifieds of the Amsterdam News and arranged to rent it via phone from her station at Michigan Bell after the other accounts payable girls had gone home. She gave the address to the hack, and from the back seat of his cab, Opal absorbed her new environs. In this city of nearly 8 million people, she was completely anonymous. No one she knew, neither relative nor acquaintance, could say her exact whereabouts. Opal Jewel. I'm an old chick now, and I like my quiet. But when I first came to New York, I was 21 years old. I could feel the energy of that place jolt through my body as soon as I stepped off the bus. At first, you just noticed the nastiness. Everything was so extra hot, extra funky, extra loud. But sitting in the back of that yellow cab, I was like an astronaut in a shell traveling through space, pressed up against the window and taking in the stars. There were businessmen in brown and blue suits looking clean and sharp, Teflon dons on those dirty-ass streets. I saw swarms of moving people who knew rules I didn't yet know, and in the swarm you could pick out gray-haired society ladies and Hispanic workmen and Hasids in their outfits, the curls and hats and coats, even in that summer heat. And then we drove alongside Central Park, and I saw a fully grown sister on roller skates, in a plaid sundress and cornrows, hollering at folks to get out the way and rumbling down the sidewalk like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I thought, oh my God, my people.
Thank you. Donnie, thank you so much.
Thank you,
I
Dawn.
really enjoyed being in conversation with you.
Yeah,
I hope
this
you
was
did as well.
amazing.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.